Well, my body lies over the ocean. My body lies over the sea. Ooh, my body lies over the ocean. Oh, bring back my body to me.
Hello and welcome to the Scott Arizala Show. My name is Travis Allison from camphacker.tv. I am really excited to be back again with Scott to talk about our next topic today. Scott, what are we talking about?
Hey Travis, how you doing? Today we are going to get into what I've been calling picking your battles, which is basically an idea around what should you talk about, how should you talk about it when it comes to challenging staff behavior, and what's happening at camp. So let's dive right into it. I wanted to start by telling everybody a quick story about an issue that happened a few years ago. And what's interesting about this story, I think, is that it had actually nothing to do with what was going on with the counselor or the staff person. It had sort of everything to do with me. And that's one of the approaches that I want to take talking about this today, which is, anyways, what had happened was I had basically had kind of one of those days at camp. I mean, pretty much everything had gone wrong. I think I'd fired somebody by like 9 o'clock that morning. I had been on the phone with Child Protective Services. I mean, as a camp director, I mean, you can definitely identify with it when I say, one of those days at camp. I hadn't eaten any meal. I mean, it was just like an awful day. At any rate, it was right before dinner time, and I was sort of coming out of the office. I was headed to dinner. It was like going to be the first moment I had to like breathe and relax during this day at camp. And this young staff member came running up to me in emergency mode. I mean, I just saw it in her face. I mean, she was, something devastating was happening. And of course, I was in that space of like, oh, well, of course something devastating is happening because it's one of those days. And she just was freaking out. She comes running up to me and she says, Scott, oh, I was just put in charge of the water balloon station at evening activity and I can't find the water balloons and what an emergency. And I mean, just like yelling, and I just lost it. I literally lost it. I just started yelling at her. Like, I freaked out at her. Because of course, right? Water balloons. How insignificant is that as far as my day was concerned? And I literally had to stop. And I did kind of the timeout right in front of her, and I was like, and I took a step back and I was like, I'm so sorry that you just, had to be on the receiving end of all that. And I had to stop, and in that moment, I realized, you know what? It is kind of an emergency for her. Have you ever been put in charge of the water balloon station like an hour and a half before the evening activity where you gotta get 500 water balloons ready for like every kid to have, whatever? That kind of is an emergency, and if she couldn't even find the water balloons, like she's nowhere near gonna be prepared or ready. And so I literally had to stop and be like, okay, what's the framework? How can I talk about this? All right, yes, let's deal with it. Let's go into the supply room and find the water balloons and get it done. And I ended up sitting with her and doing the water balloons and actually ended up not eating dinner. But that's not the point. The point is all right, how do we pick our battles? Let's really think clearly about what's the sort of steps about what it is that we're going to talk about, why we're going to talk about it, how we're going to talk about it, and what's the sort of goal when it comes to talking about some of those issues.
So how do you get a staff person then, Scott, to take the deep breath and run through, the system design of it? If this, then that. If this, then this other thing.
Yeah. Well, I think there's sort of two pieces that you've got to think about. One, when it comes to picking your battles and talking to staff about what it is that they're, sort of bringing up or what's sort of reaching the emergency level for them is, first of all, it's time management. And I'm a big fan. My wife is a PhD in counseling psychology, and so I lived through all the graduate school years with her. And one of the things that I learned from her, which is this time management technique of thinking about importance and urgency. And you can actually graph them if you want, or just think about them just on these scales of important and urgency to sort of mark off where, how important something is relative to everything else, right? And at camp we have this tendency to slide everything towards the really important. And if we were to able to take a step back though and actually ask that question out loud, I think we can start spreading out some of those things. Not that things that are relatively unimportant shouldn't get done. Of course, there's a lot of kind of unimportant things that we still need to get done at camp. But I just want us to start thinking clearly about that, like what's important and what's not. And then layer on top of that, urgent. Again, at camp, we have this tendency to slide everything towards really, really urgent, when in fact, not very many things at all are actually that urgent at camp. And we can really say, oh, you know what? Nobody's bleeding, nothing's on fire, whatever, great, okay, it's not as urgent as I need. Maybe this has to get done by dinner time, or has to get done by the end of the session, has to get done by the end of the summer, whatever it is, right? And so if we can start thinking about those two things, I think that helps ground us in what are we going to do next. And I think that's a great tool to also give to staff. When it comes to us approaching staff about their behavior, I also want to think about how effective they're being at reaching their own goal, right? And so they're doing something, maybe it's putting together a program, maybe it's dealing with some bad behavior from a camper, maybe it's trying to organize an event like opening or closing day, or a day camp, the parent open house for next session, whatever it is. I want us to start thinking about, or thinking in terms of how effective are they being at reaching their goal. If we can sort of reframe it like that, then I think we'll have a better gauge as far as, should I talk about this or should I not? And if I do decide to talk about this, if this is a battle that I'm going to pick, the next question is like, how am I going to pick it?
Where do they start? What are the things that they do in this situation in terms of being the most efficient at solving it and going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think where you start as a camp professional is thinking about what you're going to say, right? When you're approaching somebody about something, whether that's something that you're a behavior and sort of negative and a behavior you're trying to correct, something positive and something that you want to see more of. Helping to nudge somebody along, helping just to be a resource and saying, hey, you're doing a great job, I just want to sort of add my 2 cents or whatever it is. I think there's a few things that we got to keep in mind. I think one, we've got to think in terms of just sort of being calm. I think we've got to calmly state whatever's going on. I think a lot of times we get lost in the sort of drama of kind of conversation at camp, and I want us just to be calm about whatever's happening and state the facts. I mean, it's a lot easier to be calm when it's something positive and we're just praising behavior. But again, I want us to be measured about that and go up to somebody and say, hey, you're doing a great job. Let me, here are the 3 things that I'm seeing that I want you to do more of. Go. And same goes for negative stuff, right? Be calm. Okay, here's what I'm seeing. Here's why this is an issue. Let's talk about how we can change some of these things. I think if we can calmly state the facts, then it's easier to sort of listen to their perspective and what's going on, and then we can slide into, all right, so if this is what's going on, this is your perspective, here's kind of what I'm seeing, how can we kind of meet in the middle somewhere to get some sort of behavior change, right? To get what we want to get done. And that's the whole point of any kind of conversation that we want to have as far as delivering a behavior change. Like, what do we want to get done? How are we going to get it done? And then, I guess that second piece is the most important piece. How are we going to get it done? We have to be able to talk to our staff about the methods around what is it that they're going to change, or how they're going to get this particular task or responsibility or change in behavior actually accomplished.
And you think it's important, Scott, that we really break it down for them, and I mean, obviously in our own communications with them, we're planning this in our heads, but also teach them these skills?
Absolutely. I think we need to be really methodical about teaching them these skills, because not only does this overlay on a great strategy around working with kids and changing their behaviors, but this is like executive function kinds of skills that, as we know, like our young people don't have. Our frontline staff don't necessarily have all the executive function skills matured anyways. So this is helping them along the way as far as teaching them how to sort of methodically go through a situation where they're at A and they want to get to B. And B is really what it's all about, right? When we started this conversation by talking about picking your battles, right? And so there's a battle you're gonna pick. There's a policy you want to change. There's a behavior you want to see differently. Like, what's the goal? You want to win. You want to win the battle, right? Like, and what does winning actually mean? Winning means we want to change behavior, right? We want to have people do something different. Winning means we want people to be like accountable and responsible to that behavior and say, oh, I did this and I should be doing that. And we also want sort of balance across all of our staff and our program, and we want people to feel good about how it is that they're sort of interacting with each other and interacting with the kids in the program.
You know, it's funny, in our role as camp directors, it cracks me up. And sometimes it's exhausting, and sometimes it's what I love about the job, is that you never stop teaching. If you're a good camp director, you're thinking about every single moment. And sometimes I wonder if staff really like, Zoic, I just don't need to be taught right now. I just need help solving this problem. But I love that role, and I think it's so important to what we are as an industry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. People who take their job seriously, they frame their jobs as youth development professionals. And if you really break down what that means, is youth development doesn't stop because all of a sudden they're 17 and a junior counselor, or 18 and a senior counselor, or 23 and your program director, or whatever. I mean, we are taking that seriously. And I think you bring up a good point, because I think we also ultimately have to be really aware when our staff are in that space of like, I just kind of wanted to complain and talk to you a little bit about this and tell you what's going on. But I also think we need to be on the sort of lookout for how we can help not only cultivate the culture and the program that we want and that we've promised parents and so on and so forth, but how do we take care of those individuals take care and teach those individuals who are delivering the program that we've sold to parents and that is supporting our organization.
So Scott, what does it look like when the behavior starts to change at our camp?
I mean, I think that's maybe the last piece of picking your battles, is the kind of follow-up necessary, and then back to some of the great strategies of the best supervisors, which is, when you start to see some of those incremental and small changes, when you see people start to try, obviously you need to follow up, you need to praise the behavior. When you see people sliding back into old routines and patterns, you need to stay on top of it. It's this idea of consistency. If this is a battle that you've decided to pick, it's not just I'm going to talk about it once and then hope that it doesn't happen again. You're going to be consistent about it, and you're going to continue to talk about it, and you are going to talk about it across all of your staff. Just like we would say to our young people, look, just because it's that one cool kid that's easy to get along with doesn't mean that he or she can get away with something that one of the other kids who's not as easy to get along with and not as easy to manage. It doesn't mean that that we can treat them any differently. Well, we have to role model that as well. If we're going to be honest with ourselves, there are some staff that we have that are way easier to get along with, way easier to give direction to, way easier to talk to, right? We can't let them get away with something that we've decided to pick across the whole board. So, what does that look like? It looks like follow-up. It looks like consistency. It looks like staying honest to what it is that we've decided to really engage and talk about in our community.
Any final thoughts on this topic, Scott?
I think that at the end of the day, the best camps, the best programs, all that is about the leadership at camp. I mean, you can draw direct comparisons. Travis, you know this. Any of us who have ever gone to any other camps, you can draw direct comparisons between what the leaders are doing and the sort of quality of the program. And when it comes to these tweaks and changes along the way, when it comes to picking battles, with the staff around small policy things, big cultural things, behavior things, whatever it is, I think we have to remember our values, remember what is important about our program, and then stay really consistent with how we're delivering the ideas around changing that stuff.
Fantastic. Well, thanks very much, Scott. There's a lot of good stuff for us to chew on in there. For those of you who are watching the video, we hope that if you heard something in what Scott's presented today, you'll click the like button below this on YouTube, and also click the subscribe button. It's important to us that we be able to get these videos to you as easily as possible, and there are many more of them to come, so please do click subscribe on this YouTube channel. My name is Travis Allison from camphacker.tv. Scott, thank you for having me on the show today.
Thanks, Travis. My name is Scott Arizala. You can check out more about what I do at my website, which is thecampcounselor.com. You can also check out my brand new staff training resource, an online subscription called the Camp Counselor Insider. Check that out at campcounselor.com/insider. And there you can find MP3s of Scott Arizala Season 1, the Season 1. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you all next summer.
Well, my body